Corey's dad. He's stable. He's still in the ICU, but he'll be there probably till tomorrow at least. But he had one artery 100% blocked that they were able to open up, put a stent in. So she's still there with him, and we appreciate the prayers on his behalf. Before we start this morning, though, let's begin with a word of prayer. And Chris, can I get you to lead us in that prayer as we start? Amen. All right. So, as we started talking about this idea of zeal, we kind of used in the building a fire. That was the example we kind of used to begin looking at this, about building a fire. And if you remember, when we looked at that, the first thing was prepare a place. The second step is get a lighter or match. And number 3 is arrange your firewood. Well, if we think about zeal and the process, we've done that. We've talked about preparing our zeal. We've talked about igniting our zeal. Now we're in that step of fueling it, of arranging the firewood, putting it where it needs to go. And so this review is going to cover lessons 8 and 9, I think 10 and at least 10 and 11, I was trying to think through and remember, and 12. So there's 4 lessons there about fueling the fire before we move on to the next section about protecting that fire and protecting our zeal. As we think about this idea of fueling our zeal and the idea, and that idea of arranging the firewood with it, what are some thoughts as we've gone through these lessons that have stuck out to you? Does anyone remember talking about fueling your zeal?
God is the source of our fuel.
Yeah.
Every bit of our fuel goes back to God's providence.
Yeah. God is the source of zeal.
Zeal has to be tempered. I mean, you don't go off in the wrong direction with a lot of zeal. You want to have it aimed in the right direction.
Yeah, we talked a little bit even last week about, this past Wednesday, about zeal of, can it be a fake zeal? Can it be can we fake it to people? And what does real zeal look like? Is zeal something that every single person has? I think we're all zealous for something. We're all zealous for something. Whether that be we're zealous for athletics and sports and watching, and we want to talk about that. Some people are very zealous for politics and talking about politics. Some people are very zealous about academics and their studies. Some people are very zealous about spiritual things and about serving God. Their zeal is in all of us. It's taking that and focusing it, especially is what we're talking about, in more of a spiritual focus on thinking about the spiritual things of going after building that zeal. Larry?
I think zeal is something that can be positive and negative, including spiritual zeal. I mean, we can spend our time trying to help people and build them up, or we can spend time trying to tell them what a terrible sinner they are.
Yeah, it's like everything. There's good and bad in everything. And what we focus on and what we drive. And so much of our zeal is spent proving our preconceived ideas and not just letting the Bible speak for itself. A lot of our zeal is focused, as you talked about, on telling other people how wrong they are and how right we are. But a good zeal is the honest zeal, honest heart, talking about spiritual things, opening up God's Word, reading what He has to say, and understanding it.
God would never instruct us to use something that it was impossible for us to use. We all, like you said, we all have zeal for something, and God wants us to use our zeal for Him.
Yeah.
He would not demand us to do something that was incapable of our ability.
Yeah. And that's what we talked about in lesson 8 on page 38. The very first paragraph says there's an old saying, fire in the fireplace warms the house, but fire on the carpet burns the house down. And that zeal in its proper place, just like fire in a proper place is a good thing to have, zeal in its proper place is good. But uncontrolled zeal, or zeal that's not being used correctly, when we're foolish, it can cause a lot of damage. And so I think we have to be careful how we use our zeal. And I'll speak from experience in this. When I first started preaching, I was ready to fight all the fights, and everything was going to be, this is the way it is, and we're going to lay it down. And I learned really quickly, you got to soften up a little bit. You have to have real conversations. It's not, there are things that are black and white, but not everything is black and white. And when you're dealing with people who have no religious background, they're not going to have that sense of right and wrong right from the get-go. And we can't expect people to change after one sermon. We can't expect people to change after one conversation of well, this is what you need to do. I don't know why you're not accepting it. This is, it's not that simple sometimes. Evan, were you that way?
When I first started preaching, I was the same way.
When he first started preaching. Hold on, my watch doesn't go back far enough in the date calendar. Go ahead.
I think we all experience what you're talking about the day we're baptized. Each and every one of us, on the day that we're baptized, we think, hey, now we've got something wonderful, something new, something great. We're going to convert everybody around us, at school or at work or at the store or whatever. We have almost an unbridled zeal that in time we need to realize can't be used for the right thing, but sometimes, like you said, it's in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to be serving God to do it our own wisdom or knowledge tries to tell us to do it. It's not right.
Yeah. Our wisdom compared to God's wisdom. Our wisdom, if we're comparing it to God's wisdom, is almost always foolish wisdom. And so we got to look at God's wisdom. Larry, did I see your hand?
When we start out and throughout life, we are driven by our own opinions. Leonardo da Vinci said the greatest deception men suffer is from their own opinions. We have to open our minds. We might be wrong,
Yeah.
and that's hard to do.
Yeah.
That's Marcella.
As we're talking about go to James chapter 3 with me. James chapter 3. We think about this idea of fueling that fire, knowing and going back to the idea of it comes from God. Our wisdom is in, the zeal is from God. It's in God's wisdom. I think James chapter 3 is helpful for us in this conversation. And we talked about this a little bit in lesson number 8. But James chapter 3, beginning in verse number 13. James asked the question, who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good conduct, by his works, in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. This wisdom is not coming down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruits, without doubting, without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And James is telling us about true wisdom. And he asked the question again there in verse 13, who among you is wise and understanding? Show it. If you think you are wise and understanding, show it by your actions, by your works. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant, so lie against the truth. Oftentimes, the wisdom we have is what James is telling us is earthly. It's natural. Larry just pointed out. It's driven by our own desires, our own wants. It's driven by our own things. It's my own opinions. We can make the Bible say about anything we want it to make. Spend enough time, you can piece verses together to make it say about anything you want it to say. But by doing that, who am I pleasing? Yeah, myself. I'm making it say what I want to say so I can prove my point. He even goes on to say that it's demonic, that
The devil used the Bible to try to make his point.
Yeah.
Jesus.
yeah.
So he strings things together.
Yeah, when Jesus was tempted in Matthew chapter 4, he was saying all these things to him, and Jesus responded, have you not read? Or it is written. He talks about what's talked about in Scripture. Satan always takes a little bit of truth and sprinkles in with his lies to get us to try to believe it. That wisdom is not from God. That wisdom is driven by jealousy. It's driven by selfish ambition. It's driven by every evil practice. But he goes on to say the wisdom from God is first pure. What does that mean? If the wisdom from God is pure, what does that tell us? Yeah, it's undefiled. It's not driven by what I think. Here's the problem. We all have different life experiences that shape our views of how things should be. And no matter how much we try to go back to God's wisdom, it's always going to be a little tainted. It's always going to be a little defiled. It's not going to be completely undefiled. It's going to be always a little bit of what is in our own minds. It's also peaceable, he says. What does he mean by peaceable? Wisdom is peaceable. How can wisdom be peaceable?
Well, it's not at war. It's not supposed to be a reason why people should be fighting each other.
Yeah. I think he sums it up in verse 18. The fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. We're not looking just to be charging ahead with, our swords out, just trying to run through the enemy line and slaughter everyone we can in our path to prove our point. We're going to be peaceable people. We're going to be those who are driven by peace. God's wisdom isn't something to be fighting about. It's not something that should be causing divisions. We should be understanding it together, reading it together. We did a lesson not too long ago about understanding the Bible the same way. We can do that. And it just takes some effort, but we have to do it peaceably. He also says that it's gentle. The way we approach God's wisdom, the way we approach one another, it's got to be gentle, how we handle people. It's also got to be reasonable. One of the struggles I think we have in teaching is we are unreasonable in how we handle people, in our expectations of people. Larry shook your head yes. Do you have something to add to that?
Well, I was just thinking that, I read recently that two people can see something and come away with two different, understandings of what just happened.
Yeah.
And if we can't sit down and reason through things together, discuss it, and try to merge my understanding of the world with your understanding of the world and come to the truth, then we're not gonna get anywhere.
Yeah. There's an old cartoon, I'm sure you've probably seen it, where it's got a 9 on the ground or a 6 on the ground, and one person standing on one side of it and one person standing on the other, and they say, well, that's a 9, and Larry'd be like, well, no, that's a 6. No, that's a 9. Well, no, that's a 6. And if we just change positions, Larry'd be saying, well, that's a 9. I'd be saying, no, now that's a 6. You know, we could go back and forth on that. Because, as Larry pointed out, it's the position that we have in that moment.
I think a lot of times we take the position of, you said a cartoon, the old Peanuts cartoon, Sally, Charlie's little sister, she carried a big Bible because that helped her win arguments. She had something bigger to swing at. And I think we take that position.
Yeah. I'm trying to say this in the right way. We can't let our zeal be hidden behind religion. Does that make sense? I'm not saying don't be a religious person. I'm not saying don't be a Christian. I'm not saying don't let your faith show. I'm saying don't take your idea of religion and use that to cause issues, to cause division, to cause fights. Because as Christians, we need to be the first ones to open and talk about spiritual things in a healthy way and not just throw religion around to protect our own ideas and our own thinkings. The proverb writer says there's a way which seems right to a man, but its way is what? The way of what? The way of death. I can't be so confident in my mind that I don't listen to what God says. And so I just want to be, I want to be careful how we say that. I'm not saying don't let your light shine. I'm not saying don't talk about religious things. I'm saying don't use religion as a weapon against other people.
Well, Jesus tells the story about there were two sons, and the father wanted a task to be done by one of the sons, and he says, do this task, and the person says, oh yeah, I'll do it. And then he doesn't go and do it.
Yeah.
And as the father approaches the second son, he says, I will not. But then later on goes and does what his father wanted him to do.
Yeah.
Now, Jesus says, which one did the will of his father?
Yeah.
And everybody says, well, the one who went and did the actions, not just went down in the record book, oh, this is what I said.
Yeah.
I'm in God's record book because I said this. It has to be, as you said, pure, non-hypocritical.
Yeah. And that's what we get into here. As he goes on the list, he says that we're full of mercy. And so we offer grace in our dealings with one another. We offer grace in our conversations with one another.
What Jeff was saying also made me think of when the woman that was caught in adultery,
Yeah.
mercy. And that needs to come first before we think of anything talking to anybody.
Yeah.
Compassion and mercy.
Yeah. We've got to be full of mercy. He says that we have to be full of good fruits. That means the things that we do have to be good. Still have to go back to the beginning, though. Things that we do need to be pure and undefiled. They need to be peaceable and gentle, the things that we're doing. He says we need to do them, we need to be unwavering. Again, we're staying strong in our faith. We're not letting our faith waver. Showing mercy and kindness doesn't mean that we change our beliefs to appease everybody. Doesn't mean that we change the truth to appease everybody. But we can still talk about those difficult things in a gentle, merciful way with them. And he also says we do it without hypocrisy, which means we're not going to talk about it and then go do something different later. We're going to do what we talk about. We're going to be people who honor our word. That begins the wisdom that we need to have. But then he goes on in lesson number 9 to talk about embracing loving sacrifice. Not only do we have to have the wisdom of God, but we also have to have the heart of God. And that is what loving sacrifice is about. It's having the heart of God. How did Jesus show a heart of sacrifice? What did Jesus do? Yeah. And that's the ultimate example. And we're not taking away from that ultimate example. But before we even get to the cross, does Jesus have a heart of sacrifice while he's alive? Chris? Yeah. And the service that he's shown from the very beginning, a young boy, his family's going back and he's behind. I must be about my father's service. He understood about my father's business. He understood what he needed to do. And then he began to heal those who were sick. He began to give sight to the blind. He began to make the lame walk again. He was able then to raise the dead. Everything he did was about service. That's who Jesus was. And so if we're going to embrace that, then we're going to do the things that Jesus did. We're going to have that same type of mindset. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to start healing the sick. It doesn't mean that I'm going to bring sight to the blind. I'm not going to make the lame walk again. I don't have that power. So how do I take what Jesus did in having the heart of service, how do I take that and make it applicable for me today? What do I do to demonstrate the heart of Jesus in loving service? Chris? Yeah. Yeah. Loving service and sacrificing ourselves for others really isn't a sacrifice unless we don't have skin in the game, unless there's something that we are giving up. And so to serve somebody, then there's something that I have to give up, right? So how do we do that? It could be financially, that we give of our means to help somebody. It could be Marcella. Well, you stole my next two. Yeah, we give our time and energy. Time, especially in today's world, is the one thing that we do not like to share if we don't have to share. How many of us wish we had 20 8 hours in the day instead of 24 hours in the day. I got 30. Can I get 32? 32? No. Jeff, that's your job. Sorry. How many of us wish we had more time? And so when we want more time for ourselves, and so now when we think about, I need to serve and I need to give that time to somebody, so sacrificing time and energy. How many of us empty our tanks getting everything we need to do, and by the time we sit down in the recliner, we don't want to do anything else?